Shabbat Shalom. It is an honor to be here. It's such a delight to be back at BJBE and for such a, I think, critical Shabbat, critical topic. I'd like to give a little bit of a adult content warning. We won't be discussing racy adult things, but we'll be discussing difficult topics that might not be things that all parents are ready for their kids to be hearing. So take that with a grain of salt. Stephanie, who's a storyteller with We Testify, which collects stories about abortion, got pregnant when she was 17. Parental involvement laws in her state meant that she either needed the notification and presence of her parents to get an abortion or the permission of a judge. She considered ending her life. Eventually, though, she found a hotline that referred her to pro bono legal help. She wrote, "I spent the next 2 weeks working at my waitressing job, saving up my tips for my abortion, attending classes, and gathering all the documentation the attorney requested. I had an ultrasound and I was forced to see it, even though I didn't want to. I had to gather police records from the times my father was charged with child abuse and beating me and leaving me with bruises. She also had to gather school transcripts and write an essay and hand all of this over to a judge who would decide her fate." She wrote, "Although I've both worked and studied since I was 13 years old to support my family, when it came to my body and my life, I was told I was not capable of making my own decisions. My abortion was a means of survival and self-preservation for a future I wanted to live on my own terms." Of the people who can get pregnant, which includes cisgender women, to be sure, but also trans men, some non-binary people, and some other gender non-conforming folks, of all of the people who can get pregnant, 1 in 4 will have an abortion by the age of 45. People who need and get abortions come from every kind of community and every walk of life. Abortion is a Jewish issue, and it's an everybody issue. As reproductive justice activist We Testify founder Renee Bracey Sherman puts it, everyone loves someone who had an abortion, whether they know it or not. What a lot of people don't know is that reproductive freedom is a Jewish value as well. The most fundamental text underlying our understanding of abortion rights is in the Parsha, the Torah portion that we're going to be reading tomorrow. These are some of the verses. "When men fight and one of them pushes a pregnant woman and a miscarriage results, but no other damage ensues," so she falls, she's hurt, there's no other damage, "the one responsible shall be fined according to as the woman's husband may exact for him, the payment based on reckoning." So if there's an accidental miscarriage, then there's a fine that needs to be paid. "But if other damage ensues, the penalty shall be life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound." Right? So the Torah specifies that the guilty party would be liable for manslaughter if and only if the pregnant person themselves die. That's the damage. That's the disaster, right? Otherwise, they just pay monetary damages because the fetus is not regarded as a person. The Talmud then elaborates on this line of thinking, making it clear that the fetus does not have the status of personhood, describing it as mere fluid for the first 40 days after conception, which is about 7 or 8 weeks of gestation, as we would count it today. And so the first 40 days after conception, and the fetus is part of the pregnant person's body after that, for the rest of the pregnancy. And that has led many, many, many rabbinic commentators to rule, as, for example, the ultra-Orthodox Jewish legal authority, Rabbi Eliezer Waldenberg did in 1978, that abortion is valid when not terminating might cause, quote, "suffering and emotional pain." Needless to say, People who are forced to carry pregnancies to term against their will or desire experience suffering and emotional pain. And people very often experience very literal pain indeed. Those who lack access to reproductive health care, which is disproportionately people of limited financial means, people of color, young people and immigrants, people without abortion access are more likely to live in poverty and to remain in abusive relationships. Limiting abortion access also has a direct correlation to increased rates of unsafe abortions, which are themselves the leading cause of death worldwide. Right? When we deny people's abortion access, we destroy their lives. So the reproductive justice movement was founded in 1994 by Black women, and it continues to be led by Black women, Indigenous women, and other women of color. And reproductive justice brings a racial and economic lens to the work, reminding us not everybody has a choice. Not everybody has the same choices. Right? It's not enough for abortion to be legal if it's too expensive or too far away to access. It's not enough for abortion to be legal if a mandatory waiting period means that some people have to miss multiple days of work for multiple doctor's appointments and they can't afford to. Right? It's not enough for abortion to be legal if the pill for a medication abortion has to be picked up at a clinic or a hospital during working hours as a deadly pandemic rages on when school and other childcare options may be closed. Right? It's not safe, it's not practical, it's not feasible for everybody. It's not enough for abortion to be legal if someone under the age of 18, like Stephanie, we heard about earlier, was trapped in an unsafe home environment, right? If youth are burdened with difficult to navigate parental consent laws, harmed by ultrasounds, and left to figure out how to save their own lives by Googling. Right? It's not enough for abortion to be legal if there's still stories like Alejandra Pablos, who told We Testify, I became pregnant because comprehensive sex education wasn't a thing. And I knew that the current political situation would devastate the family I would create. The same people who would force me to continue my pregnancy are the same people who would rip my baby from my arms and deport me because of my immigration status. I chose an abortion, she said, because I know that when a mom is separated from her daughter, whether it is a country that separates them or an immigration prison, you might as well rip her heart out. I know this because my mother had to suffer through our separation once. I was detained in an immigration prison for 2 years. I cannot begin to think of planning a family when I know the system that I'm facing here. Not everybody has a choice, and not everybody has the same choices. The reproductive justice movement is about thinking about everything in context. And it's also about the right to decide whether and on what terms to have children, and to be able to raise those children in safety with access to clean water, unlike what's happened to the residents of Flint, Michigan, right? Free from police brutality and free from the school to prison pipeline. It's about the larger context in which we live, as Alejandra knows all too well. Over 450 state laws restricting access to reproductive health care have been passed since 2011, and 16 cases that are potential challenges to Roe v. Wade are just one step away from the Supreme Court. This work is critical, and it is urgent, and it is our work. Right? Judaism teaches that we are each created in the divine image. Kavod ha'briyot, or the upholding of human dignity, and pikuach nefesh, preserving life, including and especially that of the pregnant person, are the cornerstones of our tradition. We are taught to be part of the collective and to be responsible for everyone in the collective, and we are taught to pursue justice, to empower and to protect those most marginalized in society. This is all related to the work of reproductive health, reproductive rights, and reproductive justice. For the past 128 years, the National Council of Jewish Women, NCJW, has been working to create a world in which everyone, no matter their income, their race, their gender identity, their location, their sexual orientation, has the right to live their lives with dignity, including the right to build their families as they choose. We must not remain idle while barriers to healthcare place any individual's health, well-being, autonomy, or economic security at risk. Taking up the fight for reproductive freedom is all of our sacred obligation. Shabbat shalom.